Okay, well, I'm just going to jump right in. My name is Megan Beresford. I am the Director of Broadband Programs at Learn Design Apply. We have a webinar today, Broadband Grant Landscape. So thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully at the end of this, you'll have a bit more insight into what's happening in the broadband grant world. And we'll go through for hopefully 30, maybe 40 minutes and leave some time at the end for question and answer. Do place yourself on mute if you haven't already. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put those into the chat. Maria's going to be monitoring that, and we can go ahead and ask those at the end, and happy to answer any that come up. So to get right in, agenda, we'll do a quick introduction. I'm going to go over some tips for grants, an infrastructure overview, digital equity overview, cybersecurity overview, and then an update from BCPC. So jumping right in, who's Learn Design Apply? We are a grant management and consulting firm. We help public and private clients secure grant resources. We cover all sorts of areas. So we have a team that does healthcare, K through 12, higher education, school safety, transportation, manufacturing, and we look at all sorts of emerging programs. So if there's something new and exciting coming out in the grants world, we try to get on top of it, learn about it, because there's someone out there who might need our help. We have a broadband team. In 2021, we were 2 grant writers, and we now have 5 grant writers and specialists just dedicated to broadband. So we read all of the NOFOs, all of the guidance that comes out on broadband grants. Anytime we're going through this, we have a whole team of people learning. I think someone might not be on mute. If you want to go on mute,
please put yourself on mute. It's looking like Brian, Kathy, Drew. If you all could please mute yourselves, thank you.
All right. Anyway, our broadband team, we work with public and private clients and also do consulting. So that's what we've got with our relationship here with BCPC. Part of that relationship, we helped them create a broadband grant guidebook. So this is going to be available for everyone who's on the webinar, anyone who's interested. Maria is going to be able to provide this to everyone. In it, we kind of go over how to approach grants, how to look at broadband in your community, how to address the digital divide, going into a federal funding breakdown, and really all the things you might need to know in looking at a broadband grant. I've brought out some top tips from this as it pertains to getting started. So first tip, community engagement. So this has always been important in broadband work, but we're seeing a big emphasis and stress on this in a lot of broadband grants. So it's important to look at who's doing this work in your community, who's going to be affected, whose support you need, and get them all involved. Next, partnerships. A little bit of the same, but for this, partnerships are really important to success. So this covers everyone from an engineering partner to possibly an ISP, public, private, small businesses, anyone in public safety, really anyone that broadband is going to touch should be in and on your partnership, should be giving you some insight, part of that community engagement. We're seeing a big stress on CBAs, community benefits agreements. Historically, I think these have been more real estate development, but they're great for broadband too. So what benefits are you bringing to the community? Getting an official agreement in place, then including that in your grant reviewers love to see that. Next kind of brings both of these together, prepare. It is never too early to start preparing for a broadband grant. Getting your team in place, designating a point person who's going to lead the charge. It could be hiring someone who's going to do this, but having that point person is crucial for making sure things, 1, get going, and 2, continue. So your team, that's going to, again, be your partnerships, but internally, look at your finance folks. A lot of grants have a lot of financial components, so making sure that they are ready and prepared. We've definitely had situations where we take on a grant and 2 days later is when the finance team learns that there's going to be a grant. So you want to avoid that. Get your finance people aware of what's happening and prepared. Shovel ready is a term that you'll hear a lot. Has to do with being ready to build the broadband infrastructure. However, one thing I believe is that it can also be for digital equity too. So we'll get into digital equity a little bit later, but first, jumping into infrastructure. So I'm going to address the biggest, most recent funding source, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We've seen federal grant dollars coming from CARES and ARPA and capital projects funds. Now we're looking at IJA. I won't read all this overview right here, but I just want to call out who's getting the money. NTIA is getting $48.2 billion. FCC gets $14.2 billion, and USDA will get $2 billion. So, clarity on BEAD. What is BEAD and when will I see it? BEAD, I have found, is a term that has been used as a catch-all, and it's not. So I want to make certain in this presentation that we can get an understanding of what it is, who gets it, how it's working. So making clear, BEAD is funds from IJA that go to states and territories, and they will then develop competitive grants. So unless you are on here and you were representing a state, you don't get funds, I don't get funds. What will happen is that we will get the funds once the states develop their programs. What's the timeline? So this is what NTIA has laid out. This month, states are going to get money for planning. This is going to include tasks such as building up their offices, doing mapping, collecting data, creating a 5-year action plan. Next, what I call the Fcc Mystery Date. Recently, the Fcc Mystery Date has been November, according to them. I still think it might be end of December, could be next year. They're supposed to do it this year, but will they make their maps? We don't know. But for now, I call it the Fcc Mystery Date. And on this date, they will release their maps that they've been creating for a few years now, and they will determine how much BEAD money each state will get. After that's determined, the NTIA administration will tell the states their award amount, and then the states need to start making an initial proposal. So that's the competitive grant process that they're going to create. Then, mid-2023, which is 270 days after planning funds are received, that's where right now they're making these initial plans, the 5-year action plan, they have to turn that in. Then, next up is 180 days after the mystery date from the FCC, the initial proposal is due. So that's outlining the competitive grant programs. 60-day comment period. So after they turn in those program proposals, local units of governments, nonprofits, ISPs can challenge the determining factors for eligibility and who is served and unserved. These challenges are going to NTIA, who will then determine whether they are valid. An important point, you cannot use speed tests for a challenge. I was at a conference last month and an NTIA representative was there and someone posed the question, if you can't use speed test to challenge, what can you use? That was the answer. They're not sure yet. Hopefully we'll get more clarity in the coming months about what can be used as a challenge to this, but it will be an interesting time to see how these challenges come forward. Once they do, after the 60 days, 20% of the funds will be released to the states. So they can start their competitive grant programs with 20% of funds. This whole timeline together, early 2024 is when we would first see BEAD money. I have my little emoji. Is it going to be early 2024? I don't know. Could be mid 2024, could be late 2024. I'm not a psychic, but if we know anything about timelines for these, expect it a little bit later than what they're trying to aim for. Even after they get their 20% and they start their program, states are still working on creating a final program. After they submit that, they get the remaining 80% of their BEAD funds. So we're going to see grant programs funded from IJA, from BEAD, really up until the end of this decade. So that's quite a timeline, but Really, we're not going to be seeing these funds until 2024. So what to do until then? Because there's still opportunities to get broadband funding. State grants are a great source. So they are putting forward programs that are currently funded from ARPA, from capital projects funds, and then state legislatures. A lot of states appropriate funds to broadband grant programs. There are other federal grants, so we can look to USDA and EDA. There may be some other NTIAs coming out, we'll see. I have what I call sneaky grants. So these are grants that don't come from kind of the big three agencies we think of when we think of broadband. There's some different agencies, and they have grant programs where broadband is an eligible activity, but not the primary purpose of the grant. So Housing and Urban Development has the Community Block Development Grant, and broadband is an eligible activity, and we have seen people get broadband funding through that one. So there's some other places, where this money is available. To find it, we say subscribe. So look at agency websites, subscribe to broadband forums. We also have a BCPC summary table, which Maria will have after the webinar for everyone. We're continuing to update it. So as soon as we know some new opportunities, it'll be on there. And continue to check with BCPC for that. It's another great resource to see what you might get. An important one that probably everyone on the call has heard about is the LATA grant, Local Agency Technical Assistance. So this is to prepare entities for last mile deployment. It's rolling applications. The total funding is $50 million. The first application period was last month, and they received $22,244,056 requested. Assuming they decide to fund all of those, that leaves about $27.8 million remaining. So if you have not submitted a LATA grant, I would encourage you to look at it. It is a great opportunity to help your community plan to deploy broadband. If you're confused about what to do for a LATA grant, CPUC has put up the applications thus far on their website. So you can download that, look at what other people are requesting the funds for, get an idea, talk to your neighboring towns, neighboring counties. There's a lot of work going on, and so I'm sure everyone is happy to discuss. A reminder, though, that the funds are probably going to go fast. So you want to make sure that you jump on this one if you haven't already. It kind of then leads into the California Last Mile Federal Funding Account. So these are for the last mile connections. So this is what a lot of the LATA funds are going towards preparing people for. It's $2 billion and going to be split evenly between urban and rural areas. This is exciting and amazing for our LDA broadband team to hear. A lot of areas are just focusing on rural, but as I'm sure everyone realizes, there's a lot of urban, unserved and underserved areas. So that so much money is going to this is great to see, and hopefully other states will take note of what California is doing. We think that this will be released in the winter. That's kind of been the indication. It might be late winter, meaning January, February of 2023. I believe they'll want to give people who have LATA funds time to do the studies, the projects that often take 4 to 6 months. So I think that, they might push it back a little from what they initially said so people can have that time to prepare for the last mile funding account. Again, as you say, never know with grant timelines. Wish we did, but those are our kind of best guesses for this one. I want to move to consideration points. So these are for state grants, these are for federal grants, really anything you go after. As mentioned, there's going to be a big financial component. This can often take the longest in a grant. So you want to make sure you are preparing and thinking about this now. You're going to need to have audited financials. Typically, they're looking for 2 to 3 years of those. You're going to have pro forma financials. So this is looking at the forecast period for your broadband infrastructure. We've seen 3 years, we've seen 5 years, and as time goes on, we're seeing increasing. So make sure that you are prepared to think ahead for what your project might be. Detailed budgets. So we have worked a lot with state agencies, with the federal agencies on this, gone back and forth with them, and they want detailed budgets. So this means if you're requesting staff hours, breaking down staff hours. If you're looking at materials, stating materials as a line item, not good. They're going to come back and ask you, what does materials mean? So the more you can do upfront to break down your budget, the better. The less back and forth you're going to have with an agency after they receive your application. A big component is matching. So matching can be in kind. So what this means is staff hours. Staff hours can be an in-kind contribution. Any sort of technology or infrastructure that you currently have that would be used in deployment, that can be considered in kind. We also we do stress looking at partnerships for matching funds. So these can sometimes come from ISPs. I'm not sure if we have any on the call, but that is a source. So an example, you have a county build, an ISP is interested in getting on the open access network there. Start discussions on what a match might look like. Working on that now. These kinds of discussions can take a while, a lot of back and forth. But they can be a really great source of finding your matching funds. Not all grants require matching funds, but all grants like to see them. If it's a grant where it's not required, oftentimes you will get points if you do. In times where a match is required, if you contribute more than the required amount, you tend to get more points. So working on figuring out a match now is important to get you those points that can push you ahead towards winning. Again, look for different kinds of sources for matching. You don't need just one. Second consideration point, mapping and speed tests. So there's right now kind of three big rulings on what unserved and underserved is. So we're looking at USDA, NTIA, and the Treasury. I won't read it all out here, but what I haven't listed is latency. So all of these also mention latency and what they're looking for. And that is what latency can handle today's technology. So these obviously then affect eligibility of where you're serving. However, as noted before, NTIA isn't going to accept speed tests as a challenge, but mapping is still important. So there's been a lot of back and forth about state maps versus FCC maps. So still collecting speed data for those state maps will be important. The more robust they are, the better. And then local maps. So BCPC has a great local map for 3 counties in the area. I've included the link up at the top there and encourage you, if you have not, to take a speed test and to share it with your friends, your family, your community. Anyone who can take a speed test, the better. Again, the more robust they are, the more accurately you can depict your need, and the more likely you are to get funded, to be able to have that hard data to back up your grant. Another thing on mapping is thinking about digital equity when it comes to mapping, bringing us to digital equity. So about to go over some of these programs. There's quite a bit coming up, but again, some tricky timelines. So fall of this year, we're looking at USDA DLT, that's distance learning and telemedicine. There is $62 million for this program. It's a discretionary program, which means that it's going to be a competitive application. This is for rural areas only. So if that's your service area, your territory, if you have rural areas in your county, this can be a great opportunity to get telecommunications equipment. Also in 2022, late 2022, the NTIA TBCP program, so that's Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. Also a discretionary program, meaning it's competitive, only tribal entities. So in the last round of this, we saw a lot of applications get funded for infrastructure. In this second round, I think we'll have a lot more applications now following up for digital equity. So if you are a tribal applicant on this call, this is a great opportunity. If you're not a tribal applicant, you can still support tribes in their digital equity work. There's going to be $1 billion available for this. Originally, it was $2 billion, but they have taken part of that too, given it to the previous round of funding to fund more projects from round one. So round two will only have $1 billion. Spring 2024 is when we're going to see some IJA money in the NTIA State Digital Equity Program. So this is a formula grant program as opposed to discretionary, meaning that there are set funds that each state will receive. In total, $1.44 billion has been allocated to the entire program, and each state already has a set amount. Right now, states are working on developing their digital equity programs. They have a year to do this. So that's why we're putting down spring 2024 is when this program will be available to apply to a state program. There will also probably around the same time be a national program, the NTIA Competitive Digital Equity Program. So again, a discretionary program being competitive, there's going to be a wide variety of applicants, and we think there's going to be a lot of interest in it. This has 1.25 billion. I will say on billions, they sound like big numbers, but when you have a lot of applicants, they're not as big numbers. Clearly, there's a gap, 2023, what's happening then. There may be programs coming out, but what I would recommend is using 2023 to put together your digital equity program. That way, when it comes 2024, you are ready for an application. You have a solid plan in place, you have your financials in place, you're ready to go when it comes out and be competitive in that. I will say as well, look to your community. So when we talk about digital equity, digital navigators, there are a lot of people doing this work already. So make sure you are not reinventing the wheel, that you're looking at what organizations in your community are currently doing this kind of work. I guarantee there's probably some in the area. So bringing them on board, getting that plan in place now will be a huge benefit when it comes time of spring 2024 and those last two open. I do want to bring up the FCC Affordable Connectivity Outreach Grant Program. So the Affordable Connectivity Program, as I'm sure many know, allows $30 per household for in-need households to put towards their internet subscriptions. It's $75 for tribal households, and then $100 towards the purchase of a laptop, desktop, or tablet. Recently, and I mean recently in the past month, the FCC announced an outreach grant program. So a program that will give money to organizations to try and get more people to sign up for the ACP. There's $100 million that is going towards this outreach grant program. Not sure when it's going to be announced. Again, they only just announced that it's existing. We hope it comes in this year because, again, the sooner we can get people involved with ACP, the better. I will reiterate, there's probably people out there doing this kind of work. And if they need money, which I'm sure they do, this is a great opportunity for them to get additional funding. So, little bit of a pivot, cybersecurity. So IJA also attributed funds to cybersecurity. Obviously, broadband and cybersecurity go hand in hand. So the first one to discuss is DHS State and Local Cybersecurity Grant Program. That's Department of Homeland Security, but it will be administered by FEMA. So this is kind of a progression of funding. There will be 20 million this year, 40 million next year. There's a total of $1 billion. In July, they said that this 2022 money will be available in the next coming months. What does that mean? Not sure, but hopefully soon, because we want to see that coming out and supporting these cybersecurity programs. Even though we don't have a timeline for it, states have been working on putting together plans. So as part of this funding, states have to have a plan in place and a planning committee. So what I would encourage of folks on this call, if you are not already on that committee, is to reach out to your state CIO, reach out to the committee, get your voice heard, talk about the needs, let them know what's happening in your area, and then go back and create a program. So 80% of the funds coming from this have to go to the communities, have to go to local governments. So again, the state will create a program in which they will allocate and award this money to communities, and they'll be looking at your projects. So take the time now to start thinking about what your cybersecurity needs are, who you might need to partner with. I anticipate that they're going to look for a lot of programs that emphasize infrastructure, which is broadband, IRP readiness, monitoring, training. So have discussions with what your community might need where cybersecurity is lacking. There are two other IJA cybersecurity programs. The first one is the Rural and Municipal Utility Advanced Cybersecurity Grant and Technical Assistance. This is administered by Department of Energy. It is for rural electric co-ops, municipally owned electric utilities, state-owned utilities, small investor-owned utilities. That may be you, that may not be you, but a good thing to look at in the Q4 of this year, $250 million available for that. There's also the Cyber Response and Recovery Fund. This is administered by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. It is only available if there is a cyber attack. So a cyber attack has to be announced by an emergency declaration from DHS. And then these funds will go to states, local governments, tribal governments, and private partners as determined to help assist in the event. So there's $20 million available this year. I hope no one on the call needs these funds because that will have meant you were victim to a cyber attack, and we hope that doesn't happen. In the chance that it does, there are funds to help recover from that. So I realize I sped through a lot of broadband programs there. There's a lot happening, a lot to talk about. And again, happy to discuss any questions that are showing up in the chat. Next, I'm going to switch my slide and Maria's going to give an update on how the Broadband Consortium can help in all of these programs that I just let you know about.
Thank you, Megan. Super great information. And we don't have any questions yet, which is a surprise, but hopefully as people are digesting it. So what is Broadband Consortium's role in local grants? We do have a role, part of our what we are commissioned to do by the CPUC is actually support you in all your opportunities, help identify programs or projects, help organize, convene people to get the information and data needed to actually develop an application for submission to the CPUC. Also, so again, that's what we do, and there are several. We can help with every single one of the CASIF grant accounts. So the infrastructure grant that Megan had mentioned. One of the ones that we don't touch on a lot, but we are going to be working on quite more attentively this year is the CASIF broadband public housing account. We have plenty of opportunities to support our partners at Habitat, and the self-help housing. We can help identify and get any type of farm worker housing infrastructure. Anyway, so you will see more from us, the consortium, helping get you all organized and make sure we're not missing out on those opportunities. There's that grant account is always underutilized. It almost always has more than it is accessed. The last mile federal funding account is really, really important. And I appreciate all the time that Megan spent on that. And really, when we're talking for our public sector partners on this call, that is very significant in getting our communities connected. And the fact that it's not just for rural is absolutely exciting for all of us. So again, we can help you organize your application. We can help get you support letters. If there's data that you need that from, especially in Santa Barbara County right now, we pretty much have really good data through the strategic planning process that you can all utilize for those accounts. Talking about ACP and the digital equity accounts, the BCPC works really closely with the California Emerging Technology Fund. In fact, we are currently working under a grant with them to promote ACP, getting our local areas organized, forming digital equity coalitions, and making sure, like Megan said, we don't want to redevelop or recreate programs. We have plenty of people doing great programs all over. And so making sure that people are connected there and again, working on the ground. The CETF, the BCPC will also be going in with the California Emerging Technology Fund with their FCC Digital Equity Grant. So really, again, trying to work at the state level, streamline, pull it down to our local area as much as possible. Of course, we can encourage and support any of the other, any organization that wants to, look at BEAD funding or something else, but we are really focused on that affordability, adoption, all those things that are lining up with California Broadband for All. So hope to stay connected and make sure that you are receiving our newsletters and are on our list, and happy to answer any questions. And we do have a few questions. And
so I did see one come in about consultants who are helping with these broadband plans. Obviously, the planning that we developed, our little guidebook, is you do need more than that. The question, we hear there's a shortage of consultants who help agencies develop broadband related plans these days. Do you know any consulting firms that are operating in this space and taking new customers? Yes, LDA has a list of firms that we have worked with that we find are reputable and recommend. We are, I would say, nonpartisan when it comes to who we work with. There are people out there, but agreed, it's a busy space, and I think everyone is quite busy. Shortage of consultants, of materials, of laborers. There is a lack, but there are sources out there. We are happy to send along information. I will go, I got to get back to my slides. My contact information is here. So if you are looking for some recommendations on consulting firms, engineering firms, I'm happy to send along some recommendations that we do have. Talking back to partnerships, I would agree that those people are good, important partners to have. It's experts in the broadband space who know how to develop and deploy these kinds of programs. So good question. Yes, there's a shortage, but we can hopefully help you find one.
Thank you, Megan. If you want to stop screen sharing, we can have people pop back up. And if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and just ask a question if you have any questions, you have Megan's information. She can feel free to reach out to her and email you or email her. As soon as we wrap up, everybody that was on the email list, I'll send the PowerPoint. I will send the Learn, Design, Apply guidebook that they developed, and I'll also send the Excel spreadsheet to everyone that she put together for us for our local considerations, and with some of those timelines as well. So hopefully those will all be a really great resource for you. And again, feel free to reach out to the consortium if you need any support, and reach out to Megan directly as well if your agency needs some advice. So anybody else have any questions? Because we got done really fast.
I think I talked a lot faster than I had planned to. So
that's okay. We all love to have our days, our time back. But yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions. So if that's it, we're okay with that. I'm going to stop recording. And